Welcome to the Rethink Leadership podcast with me, Jeremy Blain. I interview leaders, experts and business professionals from around the world who are bringing leadership principles and know-how into the digitally driven 21st century workplace, with focus firmly on the how-to rather than the what. Each episode is in aid of a charity chosen by my guests, and since 2020, we've made donations to over 80 global and local causes. For this episode of the Rethink Leadership podcast, I welcome John Rossman. He is the founder of the Rossman Partners, a strategy and leadership firm, and author of 4 books on leadership and business innovation, including the bestseller The Amazon Way. In fact, he's an early Amazon executive who played a key role in launching the Amazon Marketplace business in 2002. Today, he's a leading keynote speaker on leadership for innovation and transformation and has served as a senior technology advisor at the Gates Foundation and senior innovation advisor at T-Mobile. His new book, Big Bet Leadership, Your Transformation Playbook for Winning in the Hyper-Digital Era, is out now in bookshops everywhere. We dive into John's leadership journey, learnings from Amazon, and into what Big Bet Leadership is all about, why it's a must-do for many, and how to go about it. John, thanks very much for joining me. Please introduce yourself, your journey in Amazon and after, and tell us about your new book that's out now, Big Bet Leadership.
Well, Jeremy, thanks for having me on Rethink Leadership. I love the title because that's essentially the premise of the book, is how to rethink leadership for specific type of situations. So I'm John Rossman. I was an early executive at Amazon. I was there from 2002 through late 2005. I had responsibility, played a key role in launching the marketplace business at Amazon. So that's third-party selling at Amazon.com. Today, that's 60% of all units shipped and sold from Amazon, over 2 million sellers on that platform. I left Amazon in late 2005, started working with clients on strategy, digital transformation, how to compete better, which I think is really the core problem we're typically trying to solve in these other jargon terms. And one of my key clients was the Gates Foundation. And I had a client there, my key client, pull me into his office one day, and this is 5 years after I'd left Amazon. So I'd been working with them for quite a while. And he goes, you know, John, you do a nice job of taking the little anecdotes, the little framing, the techniques from Amazon and delicately putting them into our work. I really think you ought to write a book about it, because so this is 2011. In the Seattle area, we knew what Amazon was, but the rest of the world didn't. And he had that insight. And so the smartest thing I did, well, I did 2 things smart, which was A, I listened to him, and B, I talked him into being my partner on the book. And so we released The Amazon Way, which is my story at Amazon and about the leadership principles, in 2014. And it was also at the Gates Foundation that I first heard this concept of a big bet. And so the book I just released is called Big Bet Leadership, Your Transformation Playbook for Winning in the Hyper-Digital Era. And a big bet is any strategy, initiative, plan that an organization has that has 2 key attributes to it. The first key attribute is it has the potential for actually having significant impact in the business. Many projects are incremental in nature. They make a ton of sense. You should absolutely do these. But a big bet is something that has high aspiration to it, but it also comes with lots of known and unknown risks. And we know the failure rates on these are extremely high, but those failure rates actually underestimate the impact. Those are all errors of commission, where somebody took an action and the initiative didn't work out. The big bet didn't work out. What's not measured in there are the errors of omission, where a big bet was needed. So every time you see a great company go to average, or an average company go to underperforming, or an underperforming company go to restructuring or bankruptcy or irrelevancy, those are cases where a big bet was needed much earlier. So the book is about, for senior leaders, the specific recommendations and constructs and principles and tactics to take to address these specific challenges of leading big bets, not incremental projects, but actual big bets. So these oftentimes get called digital transformations. Operating model changes are a great type of big bet. M&A, growth strategies, new market entries, all of these can be a type of a big bet.
And it's interesting, isn't it, John, that so many organizations are still hesitant for these big bets. And interestingly for me, one of those really good examples is going back to your career, and you mentioned marketplaces and your focus on that. We're still trying to convince so many businesses in lots of different industries about the power of an ecosystem which builds marketplaces on top of it as well. So 20 years on, we're still trying to do this. And 20 years on, many of those average companies, let's say, that haven't had the courage to make a big bet are in danger of going backwards, not forwards. So in that situation, what do they do?
Well, there's many indications where a big bet, a bold move is needed. And there's a lot of research supporting, and we reference it in the opening part of the book about the research that says bold moves are the only proven method of actually changing your strategic positioning, your strategic performance within a specific category. That's why the subtitle of the book is Winning in the Hyper Digital Era. Like I'm not interested in just surviving. I'm interested in actually changing the profile of a company performance within an industry profile. That to me is what winning is about, is improvement and durability of a competitive advantage. And so bold moves are the only way to do it. So relative to kind of the marketplace scenario you discussed, my general orientation on brand representation is either you are controlling your brand or somebody else is controlling your brand. And so I have a ton of friends and contacts that are deeply into the Amazon marketplace business, and their whole MO is about helping companies be successful at the brand representation in these marketplaces. Because again, the general point is if you aren't controlling your brand, sticking your head in the sand is not controlling your brand. Somebody is out there with your brand or leveraging your brand in most of these marketplaces.
Yeah, it comes back to your description of that potential for significant impact, that high aspiration big bet, as you call it, which comes with a lot of these known and unknown very big risks and high failure rates. It really is about balance, isn't it? And I'm sure.
So big bet leadership. We frame out kind of there's three critical habits that big bet legends, and the big bet legends that we have either, my co-author and I have either worked for or studied pretty intently, are Jeff Bezos, John Ledger of T-Mobile, Elon Musk, and Satya Nadella of Microsoft. And what we believe is that they have three critical habits that are different. They're additive than what other really good operators do to actually be systematic at how they execute big bets. And those three leadership principles are: they create clarity, they maintain velocity, and they accelerate risk and value. And so in the case of the marketplace discussion we're having, just because you may have a big vision about what your potential in that marketplace is, oftentimes there's lots of ways to accelerate what the high risk, high value component of that is. Defer as much of the big commitments and big costs and big commitments as possible while you test out your assumptions that are going into that and you learn along the way. So this is true agility within an organization. What tends to happen, though, in most initiatives is we tend to go about them in a very methodical manner. Instead of like identifying what the critical assumptions are, thinking big, understanding the critical assumptions, but then actually testing them out. So although the title of the book is Big Bets, the big piece is the aspiration. It's not the actual risks that we're taking. So our fourth chapter in the book is called Think Big but Bet Small. And it's all about this orientation about how do we keep aspirations high, but actually minimize the significant conceptual risks, accelerate the testing of those, and then proceed to the point where it's actually no longer a risk. It's no longer a bet. It's just a good investment to go big on something.
It's I've realized that you're preaching to the converted here already, and I'm already going off my script because you've hit me with so many hot buttons that I'm talking about with my clients as well every day, but so fundamental to the transformational landscape that we both operate in. And I like that approach that you talk about, the think big, the experimentation, the small steps that will help get you there. So maybe
And let me build on that even further, Jeremy.
go on.
Everybody, tends to think that the technology is the magic, and the technology is the riskiest part. It typically isn't. The technology is hard, but it actually is fairly doable if you apply the right resources, the right approaches. What tends to be underestimated is the business model changes, the change management that's needed in the organization, the communication that's needed, how to put incentives and leadership in place that's really oriented towards the specific needs of what a big bet is. So the whole book is about the entire holistic approach that you need to think through to lead these big bets. And even though we've been saying it for 20 some odd years, people still make this mistake. Everybody starts with knowing well, this isn't a technology initiative, but pretty quickly they start running it like it is basically a technology only initiative, right? And those are the we have one of the three critical habits is maintain velocity, right? And underneath that maintain velocity is you start off with these understanding oh, this is really about change, but then you simply tunnel into we are just executing a technology project, and you forget all that critical support and change that has to go on. So that's what part of what we help solve for is just not allowing yourself to drift into kind of this simple step-by-step technology approach that so many companies think of for these digital transformations or AI strategies.
I completely concur. And I completely concur. It's largely a human endeavor, whether it's from the top or whether it's an all level play. So we've talked about the what here a little bit. So let us now go down a level and help those tuning in who've just been frightened the living daylights out of them about big bets and what they need to do and where I need to start. Say, right, okay, well let's get some tips here. So we are in the digital era. Digital is part of how we will transform, as we've just been talking about, and speed is very much part of that landscape. It's very much the competitive currency of today. So maybe if I take you back to some of the things that you've told us about your time at Amazon, how did their kind of strategies, maybe leadership strategies, shape the world of digital leadership that other companies now and leaders can learn from?
Yeah, so Amazon has a very specific way of working, and the headline for that way of working is called working backwards, right? So start with the customer, start with the problem, a deep understanding, and then working backwards to how you solve for that. And the way they work is through a set of memos. So my Kevin McCaffrey, the co-author of the book, was my client at T-Mobile. He ran new business incubation at T-Mobile. We adapted Amazon's working backwards methods for an organization that doesn't have all the DNA and the cultural supports for how you work in this memo process. So we decoded it and made it much more template driven. And so Big Bet Leadership starts with a chapter that's called Thinking and Outcomes. Same concept of starting with the end in mind and working backwards. We have three critical memos that we think really help create that clarity, but avoids analysis paralysis. So we're always putting constraints on how to do these things. So the three key memos are what we call the what sucks memo. The what sucks memo is about finding the real critical problem that you're trying to solve for your customer, not the litany of little things, but the problem that they will pay for to have solved. This really puts you into the combination of like having deep empathy, customer centricity, customer obsession. Amazon's first leadership principle is customer obsession. It's the first and most famous of their leadership principle. The second memo is about outcome definition. What do we envision the future state being? Super clear. What's the killer feature of this outcome? Not all the vague notions of the future state where customer centric or better customer experience. No, tell me exactly what's going to be different. And then tell me, well, what are the five or less critical assumptions we're making that would have to be true for you to deliver this killer feature? And then the last memo is what we call the outcome financial memo. People tend to put together really non-helpful business cases to rationalize these types of big endeavors, right? We believe in a business case that actually helps light up the critical assumptions that we're making. Again, things that have to be true for this future state to happen. And so that you can test those, or the key costs that have to be maintained so that you're actually creating a cost modeled advantage future state. So that process of writing and debating is the absolute superpower that I learned at Amazon. Back to your question, the things I learned at Amazon is all decoded in this first section of the book, which is called Big Bet Thinking.
Great, and thanks for the explanation. And again, I'm finding it difficult to disagree with anything that you're saying here, because having the customer
difficult to disagree, difficult to actually do though, and everything. And so I would actually like, it takes patience. You have to work from it. The 2015 Amazon shareholder letter, Bezos actually talks about this culture of writing and that it actually takes time to do. And he equates it to learning how to do a perfect handstand. And, you know, in 6 or 9 months with a coach, you can actually learn how to do a perfect handstand, but don't expect that it's going to go great day one. Working in this manner, changing the way we work and using this memo written active debate format is definitely something that I believe is what separates great teams from good teams. And it's the courage to actually have vigorous debate. By writing it out, it actually creates the format and the tools and the forums to actually have that type of vigorous debate so much better. Guess what we're doing when we're actually writing and debating a concept? We're actually testing it. That is the cheapest and best type of testing. People will tell me, well, John, we're going awfully slow. I say, no, we're actually going 10x the speed of how your normal product and dev cycles would go and everything. We are shaping exactly what this is. That lets us create what we call the big bet vector. A big bet vector is anchored by the problem statement, the what sucks that we talked about, plus the specific future case that we're envisioning. Now we can actually go forward in our testing, leveraging the specifics that we understand. That's what makes these cycles short, affordable, so that you can actually test them and let them do what they need to do, which is actually be adjusted and quote unquote fail relative along the way.
Yeah, and as you're talking, I think to Tracy, what you said, this is the accelerator of what we need to do to how we need to do it, and getting to the implementation stage where it is in risk of failure as well. Often, though, there is a mindset shift that has to happen, and
I would say
particularly,
always there's a mind shift change that has to happen. That's
I'm just being
that's why
kind,
this is
John.
rethinking leadership here, Jeremy. Like, yes, absolutely, mind shifts needed.
Yeah, I'm being kind to some of the leaders here. That's all. But that mindset shift is all about readiness, and you know, while we will both violently agree on that point, many organisations that you visit and perhaps even I visit, is that we're and particularly from my own experience visiting, let me call it 20th century leaders who are struggling to think in a 21st century way. So based on what you've said so far, if we were to create, let's call it the DNA of a model leader for the digital era, what would be the key traits, the knowledge, skills, behaviors, if you like, that would set them apart and help them be an accelerator in their own right?
Well, one that I think about, that's a big question. One that I would think about is there's a really good book called Essentialism. And what essentialism is about how to keep the main thing the main thing. And our belief in this kind of changing the way we work and what we believe big bet legends do, really good transformative leaders do, is they spend more time thinking and writing and getting down to first principle problem solving versus participating in endless meetings within the organization, right? And so they keep a hefty amount of their time in kind of this essentialism way of working, of actually diving deep into the problems, into the situations, and trying to solve them versus being presented to relative to that. So, oftentimes I get asked, like, what was it like working, with Jeff Bezos? And I said, it was fantastic. He was at his best when we were actually debating a situation, solving a problem. And because he was such a talented, multi-sided problem solver and was always so bold in challenging assumptions and challenging the status quo. And that's what I believe really good leaders do, which is they actually prioritize their time and calendar to a different percentage about, kind of working in the future versus working in the current business. And so you oftentimes heard this framing of, are you working uh, in the business or are you working on the business? And I would change that even a little bit differently, which is, are you working on the business of today or are you working on the business of tomorrow? So big bet legends spend a heftier amount of their time working on the business of tomorrow and actually problem solving it, being curious and working with their teams, not in kind of this presentation mode, but as a key problem solver, giving the teams the advantage of what they're supposed to have, which is deep insights into the actual business.
Yeah, I like that. That working on the business of tomorrow really does frame it in a way which is right now and a need right now. So the
which
the
which
the
always
six
tends to which always tends to trump, and everything, right? Like, yeah, we can defer that meeting because we've got an emergency today and everything, right? And on a single basis, I understand that, but that is how the system gets up, especially for senior executives. Like, their calendars just get overridden with all the pomp and circumstance of leading the organization. And so senior executives who really want to bend the curve on the future, they find ways to actually prioritize differently so that they are working differently than other types of generally good managers.
and maybe the $64,000 question then following that is, if those tuning in are very keen now, say these big bet leadership principles are exactly what we need, what are the benefits for them of embracing that, and what are the costs of lagging or continuing to lag, and perhaps with any examples that you've got to help with the qualitative and quantitative benefits?
Yeah, so I'd say the benefits, I kind of started off with the subtitle of the book, which is Your Transformation Playbook for Winning in the Hyper Digital Era. So my hypothesis, my belief is that, this past 25, 30 years of digital transformation, those are kind of the easy times, that we are heading into the hyper digital era that I think is going to dramatically stress the ability for companies and leaders to lead companies in the ability to change. And so the ability to actually transform and become systematic at how we innovate, change, develop new business models, develop new value propositions for our customers, that is going to become a much more important skill set. But as we've already established, like, we're really bad at this aspect, this type of skill set within organizations. So I believe it's going to be the thing that separates the long-term value aggregators within an industry versus the companies that are likely to be disrupted and head towards that inevitable, downward compression of, margins and becoming a commodity. Strategic advantage is very short-lived. And so if you actually want to have above norm margins, win rates, uh, customer success, customer retention, you have to put much more emphasis on that continuous kind of reinvention aspect. So the short-term costs are, you're going to be spending time and money on things that oftentimes you'll be able to look on an individual basis. You go, well, that didn't work out. That was, and that's what big bet losers do, is they look at the individual thing and they go, well, that didn't work. We'll never do something like that again. Big bet legends have a portfolio understanding and they of resource allocation, and they look to allocate an appropriate set of resources to these future potential big bets and actually be working them. You may only pull the big trigger, the scaling move, on 1 out of 10, maybe even less. But because you have a portfolio, it gives you contrast, you're learning along the way, you're testing these things out in a relatively fast manner. And then when you have something that's proven, then you're able to scale it and go to market with it. And it's that ability to systematically do that. That's what separates long-term winners from long-time losers. And you asked for an example. Like, this is one of the reasons why I think Amazon is so different than most other organizations. You continue to see them reinvent who they are, what they are. They've made a ton of mistakes along the way, but it only takes 1 out of 100 mistakes there's an unlimited upside opportunity in business, right? It's not like we all use a baseball reference, which probably doesn't mean a lot to your audience and everything, but in baseball, a grand slam, the maximum potential you can have is 4 runs from it. Business is different. A grand slam can have 1,000 runs to it. And so Amazon, I believe, is one of the rare companies that's out there that is a systematic big better, because they are willing to suffer being misunderstood. They're willing to suffer things not working out because they believe, and they have proven to themselves, that if they keep at it in this mindset, in this approach, they can both run a great business today and they can be a systematic big bet winner.
Well, they are living and breathing what you just said before, that strategic advantage is short-lived, right, John? And it's like we can't be complacent. We must be pushing that envelope at all times, and we must be prepared to make constant or consistent big bets.
After Amazon, I was a partner at a restructuring firm for 12 years. And so I've seen lots of cases where companies didn't take the big bets that were needed. But working with restructuring clients, distressed clients, were actually my favorite clients, because they were willing to take fast and bold action. They had to. Now their options were sometimes very limited, but they were willing to take fast action. My least effective clients were healthy companies, right? Where they would say they want to, oh, we want to be experimental, we want to be innovative, we want to transform. Really what they wanted to do was just talk about it. They weren't actually willing to suffer the process of what it takes to get there, and actually bought into this. They were just milking today's business for all it was worth, and they had a very short-term mindset relative to that. And I think that's what most senior leadership suffers from, is like, I'm thinking of this as a 3 to 5 year journey for me. I'm going to leave that big challenge for the next generation of leadership. And so they're truly optimizing for today's window of business, and they are not creating the businesses for tomorrow.
Oh, you're right. And I go back to the point before around speed being the competitive advantage, and they're now making that call, and yet speed and the competitive environment is overtaking them really quickly in that respect.
And it's both speed in executing excellent in today, but it's also speed and thinking big about what the potential is for tomorrow. And I fundamentally believe that, you can equate this to two essential parts of a playbook, right? One part of the playbook is about execution really well for today, and you can continue to use digital technology and all these tools to deliver incremental improvements. Super important. That's really good. But the other part of the playbook is kind of this big bet playbook, where these transformative concepts, transformative businesses, and how you do that. And it's that playbook that most leadership teams suffer from, because you grew up, you were rewarded for being a really good incremental operator. This belief system, these techniques, this orientation is not well established at either the board level or at senior leadership level. And as much as kind of mid-management and the young talent sees the need to do this, if senior leaders do not buy in and change the way that they work, it will not work. And so that's where we wrote Big Bet Leadership for the senior leadership at a company, to give them a playbook that they can use to do a growingly important part of their job, which is to build this big bet mindset.
And that's maybe worth putting an eye now onto the organizations and leaders who are practicing big bet leadership. Um, can you give us examples of those organizations that are doing this and coming through it, taking those steps, experimenting, failing a bit, but also succeeding, and how they're actually going about it?
Yeah, so I actually had the opportunity to do a keynote a few weeks ago for John Deere. And so this is a, 150-year-old legacy agriculture equipment company. And I think that they are one of the best examples of a company and a belief system that believes in this concept of both executing extremely well today and continue to drive change, not just in their company, but within their industry, and business model changes to do that. And so this entire precision agriculture orientation, and changing from not just selling equipment, but selling services and outcomes to their clients, is really important. And one of the challenges they have is that they operate kind of through channel, right? So they operate through a dealer network. And so they have to bring along not just the end market, but the dealer market also. And so they are really good at how they communicate with both their dealers and their end customers. They demonstrate the benefits of it. They prove things out before they commit to scaling. So they're a good example of, a truly legacy company. Their core business is a material, non-digitized asset. Their customers use this to grow true crops, but yet they have a very strong future-oriented digital capability that's driving benefits, for the growers, for the dealers, and for John Deere, and they're being rewarded for it in the market.
What a great example, John. And I'm sure those now tuning in say, right, we need to do something now in some of our organizations. So what would be, and I'm sure there are a lot more, but what would be maybe your top five kind of messages for those tuning in to help get to action and accelerate progress?
Well, one would be, if nothing else, go on a learning journey, right? Go study either your competition, go study where venture capitalists are investing within your industry, and ask especially study the things that seem stupid to you, that you go, oh, there's no way that would have to work. Instead of looking at it with that mindset, ask yourself the question, what would have to be true for that concept or that value proposition to work? And so studying, but studying with kind of that curious, open mind. Go on a learning journey. That would be, if you truly are stuck and you're like, we don't believe it, then I would just encourage you to start there. I would also encourage you to look for the signs in your business where it's like, we are starting to be that company that is going from a competitive advantage to being a commodity. And so how do you see that? Well, you see it in terms of margins being compressed. You see it in terms of your vitality index is decreasing. So vitality index is a measure of how much of your current business, your current revenue comes from products that have been launched in, say, the past 3 to 5 years versus older products. If you have a really low vitality index, that's a good indication that you are at risk, because, as we've said multiple times here, competitive excess margins, competitive advantage tends to be short-lived. You see it in terms of your win rate is decreasing, customer retention is decreasing, your competitive differentiation is competing. Be looking for early indications of those things, and that's a really good sign that we got to start questioning, is this enough? The number one advantage you can have is time and corporate health to start your big bet journey. It's when, as I mentioned, I was a partner at a restructuring firm. It's when you wait to be too late that your option set and your time is very, very limited. So you have fewer degrees of freedom relative to what you do there, and it becomes more desperate moves versus an appropriate bold move. And so those would be a couple of the things I'd recommend. I don't know if I gave you 5, but those are the 2 that leap to mind. If you're really still not bought into the need to, go on this reinvention journey.
Well, I got 5, and I've
Okay,
summarized
cool.
them. Now let's see if let's see if this resonates with you then, John. Always be learning, always be curious, always check your vitality index and don't get complacent, always be questioning, and always be ahead of the clock.
That's great. Thank you for summarizing that and checking my math on it. I love it.
6, 7 out of 10. What?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, right. Excellent. Well, look, John, thank you so much for joining me and sharing so openly around this. I'm sure many will want to connect with you. They'll want to find out a little bit more and want to get hold of your book, which is Big Bet Leadership, right here for those of you watching on YouTube. Here it is on the screen. How do they do all that, John?
Yeah, so bigbetleadership.com. It goes to our corporate website. The book's available at all in hardback, Kindle. It's a great audiobook also. And the last thing I'd mention is we are giving an extensive number of free resources. So readers who read the book get an extensive number of resources to help put the book into action. More than any book I'm familiar with, we are delivering a set of additional resources. And so, find me on LinkedIn. John Rossman is probably the easiest way to directly get in touch with me. And I do welcome people reaching out.
Well, John Rossman, thank you very much for joining me. And again, for having such a wide-ranging conversation with such great insights. Please, everybody, get onto your online bookshop now. Big Bet Leadership is the book you need. Thank you, John.
Jeremy, great to meet you. Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to the Rethink Leadership podcast with me, Jeremy Blain. Please like, comment, and support us on your favorite platform, and subscribe to our YouTube channel where you can watch as well as listen to each episode.